All right, welcome back. We are COMP229 in the summer 2021 semester, and it's week 3, part 1 of our broadcast this semester. What we're going to be talking about today primarily is Express. And now one thing to note is, and let's see where we are. We're sitting at week 3, like I said. So Monday we didn't have a class because of Canada Day, or sorry, Victoria Day. Canada Day is coming up as well in the second half. But Victoria Day, no classes. So because of that, we're recording the video today. Just a brief, remember that next week on Friday, your portfolio is due, your first assignment. People have sent me messages, so just respond to those messages here at once. And they ask me, like, where do I start? You start by following the directions. That's what you do. Take a look at the directions, follow the precepts in the assignment, and you should be fine. I've also got information in the assignment video that should help you out. But more or less what you're going to be doing is you're using Express as well as the Express framework in order for you to create, so the Express generator, which we're going to use in a second. So not this Friday on, it's next Friday. So it's week 4. So we're sitting at week 3 right now. So next Friday, week 4, that is when assignment 1 is due. So just letting you guys know, it's worth 15% of your final grade. So please, if you haven't had a chance to start it, today would be a good day to go through stuff. Now, one thing to note is I have a pile of videos that you need to watch, guys. This is not something I can cover in 2 hours. It's impossible. All right, so let's go through the stuff that I need you to do. This is your homework. If you don't do it, then you won't be able to do the assignment. Simple as that, right? So you have an intro to Express, which goes into it. Now, again, I've had some comments that these are a little older. Well, they're made last year, so they're not that old. They're very relevant. They don't cover TypeScript, but remember I said you don't need TypeScript. I will show you how to use the Express generator in the video we're doing today, right now, with TypeScript. So like you can see the differences. You should be able to be fine with everything else. Site structure, I talked about site structure and routing. Next, that was in the videos, navigation, how to navigate and create a nav bar, partials, and Express and Heroku. Guys, this is like critical. Express and Heroku is required. So again, these are all things you need to go through. A lot of this stuff is fairly straightforward, and you should be able to get through. If you follow the videos, it'll be enough. One thing that it does not cover is style. And some people have asked me, like, where do I start? How do I get information about, like, how to make a portfolio site and what's it required? But remember, you can always look for inspiration at the awards website. Now, I'm not expecting anywhere near the quality of this stuff, right? So, for example, awards is a website that is for design. They do design awards. That's what they do. So if you actually look there and if you search for something like portfolio, right, then you'll see a bunch of different portfolios that people have made. And some of them might be things you can use in terms of ideas. Remember that you are not allowed to use themes. So you cannot use, this is what you cannot use. You cannot use theme forest. So theme forest, right, as an example, is out. Please do not use anything from theme forest. I know they're WordPress, but people have grabbed themes for not just for WordPress, but for other things like HTML templates. They're not allowed, guys. If you use theme forest, you'll get 0. So please don't do that. This is really around code, not necessarily how super pretty it's going to be, although it needs to be somewhat organized, right? So take a look at the awards website. There's some great examples of good ideas that people have come up with for portfolios of different kinds. Remember that you want to make a technical portfolio, so take a look at something that's relevant, okay? A technical portfolio might be something closer to what you want to do. Does it have to be so cool? No, it does not, okay? It just needs to cover the basics, which means as long as it covers the things I've asked you to do, which if you look at the requirements again, hit the requirements, not the necessarily, the nice to haves. And what I mean by that is if we look at, I'm just going to bring up assignment 1 again. Let's look quickly at assignment 1 more time. And I always use this as kind of a basis for what's happening. So this is June 4th, 2021. So that's next week, Friday is when this is due. And notice what it says. You must use Express.js. Okay, you can't use WordPress or any other kind of technology. If you use anything else other than JavaScript and Express, for example, if you use like WordPress or something silly like that, or any PHP, you'll get 0. Okay, there's no heart marks for that kind of stuff whatsoever. If you don't follow the things that I've asked you to do, you will not get the marks for your assignment. Okay, so it's not a web assignment; it's an Express.js portfolio site that you need to create. Yes, you can use TypeScript for sure. So EJS templating is what you need to use, which I'll talk about how to do that today. And you need to put it live on some kind of cloud service. You can choose Azure, Heroku, DigitalOcean, AWS, anything you want, but it's got to be live. And I talk about and show you how to put it up on Heroku in the video. So please make sure you know how to do this with the video. And then there's a piece that is all around content again. This is all you, right? So a navigation bar that has all the links to your different pages of your site. That's important. A custom logo. People ask me, like, how do I make that? Again, in the video, I kind of showed you. You can make anything that's simple that kind of makes it your own. Your home page, an About Me page, with an image of you. People are like, I don't want to put an image of myself, whatever. Well, I'm asking you to do it. If you don't do what I'm asking you to do, then you're going to lose marks. It's pretty simple, right? So, these are things that you're going to be creating for yourself to create a portfolio page, kind of site that you can use to promote yourself, because especially nowadays, you need to differentiate yourself compared to other people. So these are all the things you could have started last week. You didn't have to wait for me to get all this content, okay? And you need the content. And the other thing I say is you need to use Express and Node. So there is no other technology. People have said, can I use WordPress? No. Can I use PHP? No. Can I use .NET Core? No. None of that is available or even allowed. The only technologies you can use are HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript you need for the front end, plus Node.js on the back end and TypeScript as an option, only if you want to use TypeScript. If you don't want to use TypeScript, if you want to just follow the videos, those are fine too. I'm okay with that. But you cannot use any other technologies. Can we use a casual picture? It doesn't have to be professional. You can take a casual picture, but it's got to be of you, not you and your dog, okay? Or you and someone else. It's got to be you, right? So I'm okay with casual pictures. It doesn't have to be professional. But remember that if you're going to use this, if you're going to use this for your own, like your promotion or whatever, then it doesn't make sense for it to be something that is too casual. So be careful what the kind of content you put up there anyway. So we're talking about Express Generator today and what that is and how to use it. That's where I'm going to focus my time with you guys today, how to make this work in the EJS templating engine. That's going to take at least 2 hours of our time just doing that, which is what I'm going to be focusing on right now, and as well as Bootstrap and all that kind of stuff. Internal documentation means commenting, and you need to have, please, this is 5 marks of your final grade for this thing. So make sure you have your file name, student ID, date, all that stuff is inside of your, your main file for Express. Make sure that you have that. And then you got to put it up on GitHub. Some people have put things up on GitHub and give me a zip archive on GitHub. That's like, you'll lose half your marks for that. So don't do that. Please work with GitHub to develop your site and everything else. And this is truly important, right? Your short video, which is like, up to 10 minutes, right? As an example, to kind of talk about your site and explain how you did it and all that kind of stuff. This is important. This is 5 minutes actually. So make sure you get this done. These are the things that I've talked about, and nothing of this has been omitted or removed or anything like that. People have said, like, do I have to do all this stuff? Yes, you do. Yeah, this is stuff that everyone does every semester. There's nothing that's changed. All right. Yes, you can. You can start. That's a good start you can use the nav bar that I start with in the video. So that is kind of the first piece. Let's get going on the next piece. So we're going to be talking about Express today. So Express.js, like we talked about last week, is a wrapper. It's an extension of NPM, right? And instead of using Express by itself, again, I would have liked to have more time to go through all the details of Express. We're not going to just use this. We're actually going to use something called the Express Generator. So if you actually go here on the Express.js website, right, you're going to see that we're going to be using the Express Generator, and I'm going to install it with you right now. Let's do it. So again, I'm going to use command prompt. And I'm going to use command prompt as an administrator. All right, so that's the first thing I'm going to do, run as administrator. And I'm just going to install this as before we start everything else. So let's do it together. So I'm going to say npm install express-generator -g4 global. We should have done this already, but just in case you didn't do it, or if it didn't work, do it now with me. Yes, you can use Bootstrap and Font Awesome. All right, so that is what we've done. We've installed the Express generator. This is installed now. You can see that it's completed. We're good, right? As an example, and now I can make my site with the Express generator. Okay. So that's the first thing first. So first things first, we've done that, and this is what we're going to be using. Notice that the Express generator supports multiple view engines, which we're going to be talking about in a bit. View engines are the ability for us to use things other than just HTML for us to view our page. Remember, we're using the model view controller paradigm to display our pages, right? So that we're using the mean stack, and this is the first part of the mean stack. So this is what we're going to be doing in a second. Let's go back to this now because I'm just talking about just orientation. That's the requirement for today, that one install. Okay, last week what we talked about was the mean stack. We talked about Node.js, a bit of history of Node.js and so on. We talked about NPM and how Yarn is a little bit more effective and quick. It's a good wrapper, and it's also a project manager, a bunch of other stuff. We installed a package.json file, and we talked about things like project dependencies versus developer dependencies and what those two things mean, as well as NodeMon and the importance of using NodeMon to monitor your project as we go, because when we instantiate an object of type server, it is immutable. We have to relaunch our server or use NodeMon to do it for us, all right? So, or something like it. So that's what we talked about. Node.js we talked about it as an event-driven web development, and the fact that it's more efficient in many ways than PHP and an Apache server because of the way it handles memory and is a single-threaded environment. Okay, so we talked about that briefly last week, as well as the module system for Node.js. We talked about that. I also discussed in brief the HTTP core module FS, which is file system and path. We talked about those three things. They should be lowercase. And then we also installed several VS Code extensions so that your VS Code could look like mine. And I also talked about how to use TypeScript with Node.js and the reasons for this because of good code hinting and code coloring and tooling, which is the primary reason we want to use TypeScript when we build things for Node. Now, again, last year, a note, I said that TypeScript is optional. Why? Because last year's videos are all with JavaScript, and that's okay. It's perfectly fine. It'll work. TypeScript just makes it easier, and that's why I'm introducing it to you guys, because I think it's the right thing to do, right? Remember that if I just wanted you to use JavaScript, I wouldn't have to do these little sessions with you at all. I just say, go, watch the videos. And that's not the idea. The idea here is I'm trying to add value to what we've done last year and bring things up to speed. A little bit is what I'm doing is adding additional information, and that's the value I'm giving you this semester. tsconfig.json was required. It's a configuration file for the TypeScript compiler. Some people had issues with TypeScript. Remember that TypeScript has to be installed on your system before you use it, and some people hadn't done that properly. So that's one thing. And then we talked about transpiling, which is the act of moving from TypeScript into JavaScript, because remember that your browser only understands JavaScript. It has no idea what TypeScript is. So we have to transpile, and we do that properly through yeah, that was weird. We do that properly through, sorry about this, guys. We do that properly through Visual Studio Code. Sorry about that. I don't know why, but a Zoom just dropped out for me. So there you go. All right, so that is what we're talking about, that we talked about last week. And this week, we are going to be talking about how to install Express and a new Express application really quickly, but mostly around EJS views, a little bit of serving static files and routing, and especially about the Express generator. Okay, so that is what we're going to be starting off with. So last week, what we did, if we look up online, is we have a GitHub repo. So I went to github.com/Centennial College. And if you notice that, I shared with you a bunch of examples. So B, C, and D week 2 stuff from last week. These are the GitHub repositories. So you could always use the repositories I share with you to help you. That's why I'm sharing it with you. I'm not sharing it with you because I don't want you to use it. I'm sharing it with you because I intend for you to use it. So if any code that I share with you is fair game, as an example, but it has to be, the content has to be your own. So please make sure that your content is cool. So I got these 3, examples. And what we did last week is, I'm just going to go in here and pull this up here. We had last week on the desktop under Centennial, we had under COMP229 week 2 B, C, D. I'm going to go with D because you guys are the D team. And I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to copy this from week 2D to week 3D, even though there is no B and C this week because there was no class on Monday. Let's try this. So again, all I'm going to do is copy this and paste it, which makes this an extra copy. And all I'm going to do here is just change this to 3D. Okay, one thing to do whenever you do this and you copy stuff, you know that you have a .git folder that's in here. So there's 2 things we can do about it. We can delete the .git folder and start Git again, or instead of doing this, because we're going to use this folder as a new structure in a second, right? What we're going to do is, because I want to base some of this, I want to keep some of the stuff. I want to keep the tsconfig.json. I want to keep the README file. I want to keep the package.json to some degree. We're going to come back and fix this in a sec. And the index.html file is going to be gone. We don't care about that, but we do care about another structure that I'm going to introduce to you in a second. So we're going to do that really quickly. So I want to use this, even if you download it from GitHub as an example, and if you clone something, sometimes you can modify this, and we'll use that in a second. I'll show you how to do that. So you can start with the project from last week, just make a copy of it, and then we have to do something with our Git folder in a sec. Okay, so in order for me to promote that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new repository right now. So let's do that. So new, and it's going to be called COMP229, again, summer 2021, and it's going to be week 3D, even though there is no A and B and C. And make it public for you, no README file or anything like that. Press enter. And then at least we have a spot for this. So what we have to change is this part. This part is different compared to week 2. So that's the stuff we have to change when we put this up. Okay, so that's one thing we have to do. So let's pull this up. So here is Visual Studio Code. And I have got my project files here on the left. Sorry, this is Visual Studio Code from last week. And this is my project files on the right. I'm going to drag and drop from my project folder inside of my File Explorer into Visual Studio Code again. So just drag and drop. And what you're going to have is all the files that are inside of the project are going to show up here. Okay, so this is a copy. One thing we need to do, and this is just going through and installing changes and a bunch of stuff. Sometimes this happens when there's updates to some of the extensions, and that's fine. Don't panic when you see this kind of stuff coming up, or even connections to things like your .NET Core debugger and other things that it's trying to figure out. Don't worry about this. But one thing we do need is we do need to kind of add in, I'm just going to put in PowerShell for a second because I like using PowerShell. And let's just get rid of my other 2 command prompts where you can do that, right? So all I have is PowerShell here. And what I want to do with PowerShell is I want to remove the remote. And to do that, the command for the remote removal is the following: git remote remove origin, right? Git remote remove origin. If I do that and press enter, and if I type in git remote, you're going to see that there isn't a remote. Right now we need to add it in. And what I need to do with this when I add a remote is I need to go back to what they've given us, which are these 3 lines right here. I want to copy these lines now from the new repository. This is how we can take one repository and use it for the next one, right? Take these 3 lines, copy them. So Control-C or right-click and copy, whatever you want. And then when we go back to Visual Studio Code, just right-click, and then it will paste everything in there and press enter. And that should put everything up in the new repository. So now this is our brand new repository, week 3D. And if I go back up to GitHub, you can see clearly that there's the repository from last week. Things that are missing are you have a permission problem with PowerShell. You can look it up you can fix it if you have a permission problem with PowerShell. I talked about this last week. If you did that, and if you look at how to fix it, right, what you need to do is you have to, this is the wrong one. You have to, there's a Stack Overflow example where you have to change the PowerShell commands, not here, obviously. Actually, I shared it with you last week, which is you need to set the execution policy right here, right? You have to start in the VS Code PowerShell terminal. If you type this thing right here, right, or even if you run PowerShell as administrator, so again, you would kind of go here and go PowerShell, right? And then in PowerShell, oh, let me go back. You have to run this as admin. So you go PowerShell, and then you right click, and then you go run as administrator. It's going to ask you if it's okay. And once you've run it as administrator, you can type in this execution policy, set execution policy unrestricted. Once you do that, you restart Visual Studio Code, you'll be able to have no problem with PowerShell. All right, so that is this. I want to change this because this is saying week 2, and we're not week 2, we're week 3. So I'm going to go back to VS Code here. I'm going to go back to VS Code. There it is. And do that here. So in here is readme.md. I'm going to change this to week 3D. I'm also going to say demo project for week 3. These are all things that are not going to change. So save. And what I want to do now is I want to use Express Generator and convert this to an Express Generator website. We can do this on an already existing project. And the way to do that is inside of VS Code, we can do it here. We can step up one. So if I do CD and then ... and then press enter. So that is CD ... like this. If you did that, it's going to take us out of our project directory and up one level to COMP229. And all I have to do is do something that looks like this. So I can say express, right, minus E for EJS, and then the name of the folder, which is week 3D, right? And if it fails, if I try and do this, right, and if it doesn't know what I'm doing, right, then it'll give you an error. But you notice that this did not give me an error. It says, warning, EJS has been renamed to view EJS, but I use minus E for week 3D. Now, this is interesting. If I refresh, right, do we see any changes here? And if you don't, then something has happened, right? This is important. So let's take a look and see what has happened. Let's do a change and take a look. So dir, we can see that we have week 3D, and we also have week. Why do we have week like this? Because week 3D does not compute in this. Let me explain. So in command prompt, people had this problem. That's why I'm mentioning it. Notice now I have this thing called week, even though I said week 3D, right? Why? Because this is where all the files went, right? Because it doesn't understand my spaces in command line. So let's remove this. Let's delete it again and try again. And let me show you the real command. And the way to do that would be, again, it's express, right? Minus E for EJS. That's the view engine we're going to use. And then space the name of your folder. You can put it in quotation marks. And we can say something like week 3D, right? In quotation marks, and press enter. Now it's going to say, this is what I wanted. Destination is not empty. Are you sure to continue? If you press enter, it's going to take no as a default. You want to use yes here. So press Y and press enter. And if you do that now, you can clearly see what it's done. It's installed all these things. It will be able to overwrite. All right, so this is what's happened, but we need to go in here now and change things because you notice that my package.json got modified. And also my readme.md got changed because I changed it. This has been updated, my app.js, I also have an index.js, which is still there, and an index.ts, which is still there, and a tsconfig.json, which is still there from last week. This is why I wanted to do this. But this is the structure that we have right now, and it's not correct. But we're gonna go and step forward with it and use this structure just for a second, and I'm gonna give you the final version at the end of this session. Okay. All right, cool. So this is the beginning, but we need to do an npm start or an npm install, right? Because none of these modules have been included. These ones, they're not included yet. Also, it says start node in bin www. Actually, it's written over our package.json file, right? And that's okay because we need this stuff. One thing we also need is to update. Sorry, guys, I'm not sure what's going on today with Zoom. One thing that's we're going to continue with is that we need to update these to the latest versions. This is the last version that happened, and there's going to be some changes that we're going to have to make here. So before we go on, what I want to do is I'm going to clear, and I'm going to say git npm update. All right. So again, it's kind of looking at stuff and there's no vulnerabilities, right? What we want to also do is a yarn install because we're using yarn. So I can't use really npm. I need to use yarn because I've been using yarn from before. So let's do a yarn install, and it's going to install all the modules that I was missing, and it's going to put them all inside of my folder, inside of my node modules folder, right? That's where it should put them all, right? But notice that it did not. I can tell you it didn't because even when I did a yarn install, we're in the wrong spot. Let's go back and do a directory. It did a wrong thing because I didn't move into my other directory. This is my issue. Let's delete the stuff that I've got here. So first of all, let's remove node modules. Totally my fault. Hold on a second because I forgot to move back in. And I can tell right away because nothing changed here, right? So this is a good thing. I mean, this is a mistake you might make too. I just made a mistake and I can correct it. So I'm going to go back to my desktop and go to Centennial, go to COMP229, and I'll just do it with my file explorer. Get rid of node modules that we don't need. Goodbye, node modules. Get rid of all this stuff that we don't need. Goodbye. This is a mistake that can happen if your stuff is out in the middle of nowhere like this, outside of your project files. Nothing's going to work. Let's get back in there. So let's just go into CD, and then we want to go week 3D. And just like before, we have to do the same thing, CD, week, and with quotation marks, week 3D, because I've added a space. There we go. Right? And if I do a directory now, I'm in here. This is what I wanted to do in the first place. Let's do that again. So I'll say yarn install. Now it's going to install all those things. This is more of what I was expecting. And if you go and refresh now your node modules, you can see that node modules has a ton of stuff in here. Okay, that's good. Let's try it again. And I'm going to do a yarn upgrade. If I do this, it's going to go and upgrade the modules that I've got here to the latest versions, which is what I want. Okay, 1.4, 1.14, and so on. So your package.json, what's going to happen is it's going to update, right? So take a look at package.json, right? Anything that's in here that is older, it's going to upgrade. Right, so 4.16.1, you know, again, it went through and it updated all of this, right? All these modules that were changed. So it went to the next version. That's what it did. So that's what yarn upgrade did, right? So it resolved packages and it moved everything up. If I say, so there's upgrade and update, yarn update. If I did that, it's going to say there is no update, right? 'Cause that's a NPM thing. Okay, so yarn upgrade. Whenever you want to get commands like that, you can go yarn help, and it'll tell you all the different things that you can do, right? So example, you might have an import, an install. There's definitely the commands for yarn are add, which is what we're going to be using, as well as remove. Those are the two that we normally use. We can also do yarn run and a bunch of other ones. Okay, so those are the things we normally do. So that's been upgraded now. All right, so what does this give us? And do we need our index.ts anymore and our index.js map and our index.js at all? The answer is no, we don't need these ones. So let's get rid of them. Delete. And I'm also going to get rid of my index.html because we're going to be using a view engine as opposed to HTML. So let's get rid of this. So no more HTML. No, it doesn't install the latest version. It installs the version that's built into the Express generator. Sorry about that. That's what it does. All right, so pretty cool. That's what it's done so far, right? It's got the this stuff going on. Now, one thing that I don't like and what this has, and again, I haven't put this up on GitHub yet, but I'm going to in a sec. One thing that I don't like is the Express generator structure is not what I like. So I'm going to modify this structure after I put the initial version up on GitHub so you can see it. So first, I'm going to do this. Remember that we already have an initial commit from last week. So I'm going to say git add dot. This is going to add everything to your Git repository. Next, say git commit -m, and I'm going to say upgraded project to use Express. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to git push. And what this is going to do is going to push this up to our repository. And the repository, like we said before, is where the heck is it now? Here it is, up here. And if I refresh, you can see that we're going to have 3 commits, right? We had a couple from last week. This is kind of last week that we made initial commit and an initial README file. And this time we used this upgraded project to use Express commit this week. So now what I need to do is I want to share this GitHub repository with you, and I'm going to copy this and go into our week 3. And under week 3, there's going to be a section where it says GitHub repo, and I'm going to add a new link there where you can follow me. If you want to compare your code with my code, this is a good example of how it's going to work. So this is GitHub repo from week 3, okay? So if you want to follow along, go up on eCentennial, and you can get a link for that, which I think is really useful. It'll be useful for you guys as you go forward. So there's GitHub repo for week 3. Okay, and that should be in the week 3 course shell part, the module for week 3. And you'll see that there is, again, the video tutorials that I expect you to do for homework, which I released earlier. And there's going to be 2 pieces. One is this part 1, which is my video that I'm making right now, as well as your GitHub repo for all your code that you need for this week. On says, how many commits should we make and on average? And really at the end of the day, you should make a commit for every function that you add or every feature on, so it can be many, many, many commits. If you only made 4 commits, that is bare minimum. It's like nothing. You haven't done anything really. You haven't worked with your project at all. You're just using it as a backup, right? So that's not really great. All right, so let's continue with what we've done now. So let's test to see what we have. So one thing is we've loaded everything, but let's test it. And I'm going to use nodemon to test it out. So let's do that. So we'll say nodemon. And when I do, it's going to basically point to www, which is inside this bin folder. And that's kind of cryptic the way it works. So that doesn't make any sense. We don't want this. We're going to remove this later. But first, let's accept what we have as a basis. So now I'm going to bring up my localhost 3000. And you see that you get Express like this. This is the first page that you would get with Express. You should have this too. Henry, can we work on a whole project and push the whole code in one go? No, please don't do that. Please push as you go. So you commit, you add new stuff, you commit as you add your stuff, and then push. Because if you only push once, even if you do a bunch of commits, what if something happens to your computer before you push? You lose all your code. So please push regularly, I would say, to GitHub. All right, so don't just push once and do a lot of little commits. It's okay to do it, but otherwise what's going to happen is your laptop is going to be gone, and then or something's going to happen, And then you're going to be like, well, I lost all my work. Please don't do this. No excuses for losing your work if you work regularly with Git and GitHub. Okay, so let's move on. So we have this. This is a good test, and this is what you should get by default when you're working. This part, Express and welcome to Express. But this means nothing for us. We need to do other things than this. And again, I'm going to go back to our code for a second, right? And we want to modify this code. I'm just going to close this off to restructure. This is what I talked about in the video, but I'm just doing it a lot faster. So how do you do it? Well, this www is really the server piece. And this app.js, well, that's really the piece that we want to configure. So these are two files now that are much larger than what we dealt with last week. So a bit of a little bit more. That's why you need to do the work that I talked about, which is going through the videos with me. So you have all this stuff. So I want to change this www by dragging and dropping it out into here. That's what I talked about in the video, and that's what I expect you to do now. So do that first. And then once you drag this out, change this to either server.js or index.js. I've done it different ways. This week, I'm just going to change this to index.js. So I'm going to rename this thing. So rename to index.js. Just for a start. Wow. Wow, we're really having trouble with Zoom today for some reason. I'm not sure why. We're going to continue, though, because that's just what we do. Okay, so that's cool. So I just want to make sure I have you guys still on. That's going to be a real slowdown for me today. I didn't expect that. Okay, let's continue. So we have all this. We have our index.js, but unfortunately what happens is inside of our package.json, it's pointing to node./bin www. I don't want even have a bin folder, so let's get rid of it. Delete. And we want this to go to node, and then instead of that thing, we want to go to index.js. So that is the new command for start, like we talked about before, right? So that is what we want to have happen. We're missing a bunch of stuff here, like for example, our repository and a bunch of other stuff for this package.json file. And I'm going to update this in a bit. Just bear with me while we make everything work, okay? So I'll save this package.json because that's the first piece. And now our index.js is our entry point, okay? Which means that this would totally crash. So let's just stop this. So we're going to stop this nodemon. And we also know that because we've changed everything here, what's going to happen is that this ./app is what is going to be accessed here. So your index.js is going to look at your app, which is here. All right, this is the app.js. Let's run it again and see that this works now. So again, control backtick and do another nodemon. And let's see that it runs, and it does. So that you can see that it started, right? And if I go back to my code and refresh, we're still good, okay? And you can see that if I go back here, it's already reading the style sheet that's inside of public and style sheets and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that is what we wanted to do. So that's step one. I'm using the camera on to record on YouTube. So I'm live on YouTube. So if you watch me on YouTube, you'll see my stuff there. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so this is pretty cool. We have this stuff, and all this is working, and this is still using JavaScript and a bunch of vars. So the next step is let's before we restructure up here, let's change all these vars to lets or consts. Or let's use TypeScript, which is even better. So let's do that first. So I'm going to use TypeScript now. So tsconfig.json, this is all good. But what we want to do is I want to change the this index.ts and the this to app.ts and my routes to my index.ts and all this kind of stuff later on. Let's start with two things. Let's start with these two things first. So index.ts, let's make this to, or index.js, we'll change it to index.ts. So rename. Again, you can follow the video if you don't want to use TypeScript and you want to use JavaScript. Remember, this is an option. So we cannot do these things. But before we go there, I want to do a Control-Shift-B to transpile from index.ts to index.js. So we want to be able to do that first. So again, remember, we need to use Control-Shift-B to transpile. Let's do that. So Control-Shift-B. it's going to take us to this, right? And once I've done that, it's going to start transpiling. And it's going to create this index.js file, which is the one that it needs to read, not the index.ts. Index.ts doesn't do anything for us. All right, so that's the first thing, index.ts. Now we need to change these. Remember, these can't be vars and app. This got to be an import and then app from app. That's what I have to do. So if I did that, if I said import, now there's two ways of doing this. Let me undo that change first. One thing at a time. Let's import the stuff that we can from the core library. So again, this would be import HTTP, like we did last week, from HTTP. This is the first piece we need, because if we did this, now we're starting to see some changes. We also do the same thing from debug. So we're going to do, and we have to break debug down into two pieces, right? Which is, you can see that what we want to do is we want to call debug, right? And what we also want to do is use this week 3D server, which is something that we want to create. So we can't just do var import. We need to do this in two steps. So it would be something that looks like this. So we start off with import debug from debug. Okay, so that's the first thing we have to do. And if debug, as an example, is not there, the module debug somehow is not there, well, there's a couple possibilities. Even this is giving us an error. And the reason for this is because of this first piece right here. All right, it's this piece right here, because this piece right here is giving us a little bit of issues. But not to worry. What we want to do then is call debug and pass in this stuff. That's what all this was kind of doing everything in once. And we're doing things step by step here. So that's the first thing. We're just using this, and this first thing, which is app, which is requiring app, this can't be this way because we need to use a different module pattern than what we're seeing here. Let's go back and fix app now. So we're going to go back to app.js and change this to app.ts. So this is the big work here. So rename, we're going to go to app.ts. When we do so, it has a bunch of errors, and this is good. These are good errors to have because it means that we need some work to do. Okay, let's go into this. So this is import create error, right? From, that's all it takes for you to change things, right? We want to start off with this, right? Save. Remember that if there's something that's missing, HTTP errors, for example, in my package.json, if HTTP errors was not included somehow, then this is where we would have potential issues, right, with here. So this is what's happening. Import, let's do the same thing. Let's keep going. Import express, right? And we want to go from express. So these are the things we want to do, right? Follow me here. Don't worry about the errors for now, okay? And then import path, right, from, and then this. Same thing with cookie parser. And then from cookie parser. Okay. Again, just chill out about the errors for now. And then same thing with logger. Import logger from Morgan. All right, and these we have to make a change in a bit. We're going to go back to this in a second. Let's leave these as is for a second. And then what we want to do is we want to skip down, because once we've done this, then app.js gets created. This is our actual file, what this is really going to look like. Notice it changed everything to const and where it could, and then it kept var where it couldn't, okay? So that's one thing that's happening. So let's scroll down here, because again, we have some errors. One thing that we have here at the bottom is this error with module exports. And what I explained in the video is that module, when we do a module exports, it creates an object that's a container that can basically contain all of the modules that are going to be exported, right? So instead of modules export is equal to app, I mean, this is totally fine and doable. I'm just going to bring up a little bit of a reference here for myself, just to make sure that I get everything right, because we only have a little bit of a short time, and I want to make sure that I get things right for you guys. Just 1 second, because I don't want to do things wrong. So I'm just going to go into the stuff I need to do. 1 sec, guys, while I reconfigure. So what we want to do at the bottom of the module is we don't want module exports, right, at all. What we want is near the top, right? So if I go back to app.ts, we get rid of this. Let's comment this out. And at the top, we're going to go into where next to it says where var app is equal to express. What we're going to do here instead is we're going to say that we want to export default, right? Because what we can do is we can, with TypeScript, we can say that export default, right? And you can sit there and say that app is the default that you want to export, all right? So export default app, which is this, it creates an express, but notice that we're getting all of these errors. And why are we getting these errors? That's the first thing you got to figure out. Like, because these errors, they should not be. They should not be. And the reason why they're there, there's basically one reason is that TypeScript is either not detecting. Sometimes there's a bit of a glitch that can happen as well, where we need to make sure that everything is good with tsconfig.json. So example, you need to have all of these things that we talked about before. And if somehow you don't have your compiler option set up properly, then that would be bad. The other thing that can happen is where it says that there's an error, right? It's going to go through and find errors in your code based on what you've kind of come up with. And you can look at all the errors that are here. So here, var require app. Well, you can't use this anymore because that would be in this index.ts, because now app is going to look like something different. So we're going to try and correct one error at a time. And this is what I'm going to be doing with you right now. So again, instead of import, the way we have it here, we're going to say import app, and we're going to say from ./app, which is the important piece. Let's get rid of the equals. So notice that that went away now. The error, we kind of cleared the first error, first hurdle, if you will. So once we've done that, that is the first thing that clears. And we want to make sure that we, and sometimes, like I said, it messes up. So we can always Control-C and close off this thing and try it again. So Control-Shift-B, which does the watch task, which is what we want to start off again, because it'll go through and it'll recompile these. There's 7 errors that we have here. We're going to take care of them one at a time. So the other thing is that one thing that could also happen is in our node modules, if there's something in here that's missing, right? And so a lot of times what I do is in my package.json, I'd like to use dev dependencies in here as well, not just regular dependencies. So because it really helps with TypeScript. Because TypeScript doesn't know anything unless you tell it to know, right? So for example, it knows about cookie parser. As an example, it knows about all this other stuff, but we need to upgrade it so that it knows about everything, okay? So what you can do with this is, let's go back to Node here, or let's add a new PowerShell. And what you can do with this is you can do something that looks like this. You can say yarn add @types, and I want to know about node. Remember we talked about this. You need to know about node. So you can say @types/node and then --dev. So that's the first thing we do. We say like, let's add information about node. So we can remove some of the errors that we're going to get. So we need to know about node. Okay, let's keep going. So yarn add and then @types/ and then the next thing, cookie parser. Cookie parser. And you can do it in one if you want. You can do @types/ all at once, debug, right? @types/ slash EJS at types slash express, and then at types slash HTTP errors, and then at types slash Morgan, and then minus minus dev at the end, and it'll add all of those as dev dependencies for you to use. If I did this, you can see that it'll add all those in there. And that takes away, notice it takes away some errors. It went from 7 errors down to 2 and a bunch of errors down to 4. Why? Because now TypeScript knows about those things and we didn't know about them before. Okay, just things to note. So notice that debug is at 4.15 and this is at 2.69. I thought we took care of it. Let's do I'm just going to do that. I'm going to try an npm update, and I'll see if that can work for us instead of yarn. Yeah, that worked. Do an npm update, guys, because now notice that types debug went to 4.5. Oh, no, this didn't work. Look at that. Still didn't work, eh? Okay, let's try an npm. Let's do an npm help for a second. I just want to see that there is, yeah, that's weird that it did that, because that should have updated for sure. Like, these modules are old, right? I wonder if I do them individually. Let's see if I can do them individually. Sorry, yarn update cookie parser. Sorry, I want to make sure that these are all important. Yarn upgrade, sorry, cookie parser. Yep. Yarn upgrade debug. Yarn lock. Oh, that's why. Let's get rid of this. Sorry, I have 2 locks. When you have 2 lock files, it doesn't do the stuff it's supposed to do. That's really weird. That should totally work. Let's see if I can do one at a time. Yarn upgrade EJS. Nope. So these are ats, right? And this is greater. So that is a problem. This is different. So when you have a symbol like this, right, it basically prevents you from doing that. So we can say, if I change these to carrots, like this, I'm just going to make sure that I have the right structure again, because I think that's probably the right thing to do. Yeah. I think I'm going to change these to all these to carrots, guys, which is the up symbol like this. Then it's going to allow me to upgrade. Let me just do that, and then that'll do it for us. I want to upgrade because it's better. So let's try this one more time. Yarn upgrade. Yarn update. Updated log file. Yeah, didn't do it though. That's weird. It's really bizarre. I've been able to do this like many times, and yarn upgrade debug. That's really strange, guys. EJS is like 3.6. Look at it. So this is the add types. Well, we can always do it one by one. Yarn add cookie parser. Oh, that's better. Yarn add debug. Yarn add debug. Oh my God. Yarn add EJS. Yarn add express. Yarn add HTTP errors. I'm just overriding, guys. That's what I'm doing. yarn add Morgan. Yeah, okay, now it's good. All right, so this is what you should have. And I've updated all these to the latest versions. Why? Because that is going to be better than what we had before. Okay, and it's going to also match with my code hinting, which is down here. So this part, dev dependencies, are all my code hinting that I need for TypeScript. And these are all the latest versions of my code that I need here. All right. This is nice. Okay, good. Now, what I also want to do, because I want to start taking care of these errors, I know that where these errors are coming from, it doesn't know what val is, because what is val? It's gonna try and figure this out. I'm declaring a function down here, which is normalized port, and it needs to know what val is, right? I'm also using vars in here, and that's bad. So we're going to remove vars and make them something different. So let's do that together first. So let's take care of the errors in my index.ts first. Okay, first things first. So one is, I find that when I include or import at the top here, let's import another module, import create error. Let's call this create error from HTTP errors. Notice that it comes up now. I get code hinting for this, which is cool. Normalized port, this should be let. Let's do a let here. Let port is equal to normalized port. Okay, remember we want to do let as opposed to var. Vars don't exist in our language. We don't let them exist. Let server, we'll say let server is equal to create server. Okay, so this is all good. Create server is working now and all this kind of stuff. Server on, as we did before. And as we go down to normalized port, what we want to say is that val is of type string, right? And that val, the normalized port function returns 3 values. This is something that TypeScript can do for us. It can return either a number, or it can return a string, or it can return a Boolean. Those are the 3 options for normalized port function, right? We can change this to a let port parseInt, okay? That's something that we're going to, because what normalized port does is when we put this up on the server on Heroku, it's going to go through and it's going to try and assign a port that Heroku is going to give it, not port 3000, because port 3000 has no bearing on what we're doing. Okay, so that's something that's going to happen. All right, and that's the first problem. So the first problem that we have now, we only have one error left on the left. You can see that. And when we go down to this function, which is called onError, we can change this as well. So error is of type. Remember, we imported HTTP errors. It's of type create error is what we called it. .http error. So that takes care of the type for onError, right? And of course, this returns void. Okay, so that's something that we're going to do there, right? So all the rest is something that's going to happen. So syscall, these are all good. This is good. We're going to get back and do something different here later. But for now, it's looking really, really good. And finally, the function onListening is going to return void. And these got to be lets. So let and let. And my friends, we've taken care of all the errors in my index.ts. Let's push this up to GitHub as is right now. So again, you can have what I have by looking at your GitHub repo and comparing it to mine. So again, I'm going to go git add dot. You can see these are all things we've changed. Git commit -m, and we'll say fixed errors in index.js, or .ts actually. And then git push. So now you can have all those things up on GitHub. So I get a question. The Express generator should have gave us the TS files when it was generating. No, it doesn't, because Express generator doesn't use TypeScript. All right, so that is what we're using. So now you can see that the index.ts is no errors, but we still have 4 errors on my app.ts. Let's fix those next. So now we're going to go to here. And notice that all of these errors disappeared, but now we have these ugly vars. We want to make these two lets. And we're going to go through one at a time and get rid of them. And why? Because it's super important that we get things done the right way, so that way it's working for you guys as opposed to the way it was done before. All right. So again, whenever you see a var, just change it for now to a let. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to change. This is wrong, but we're going to get back to this and fix it later. Especially with Express, where it says Express, the app is Express. One thing we can do is we can make this app const, because we know that app is never going to change. So const is also something we can use instead of let. Okay, so const is something we can do there. Export default app is definitely required. What this does is it exports app as the default, object for this module. So basically what happens is whenever you use an export statement, whether it's module.exports in JavaScript or export default in TypeScript, it creates an object that packages up everything else we have here. So what we're actually doing here in our app.ts is we're configuring, that's what we're doing, we're configuring the application. That's what app is. It's the Express application that we're configuring. One thing to note is that here we have our app.set, and every time we do app set or app use, we're starting to configure the application. Okay, so we don't have any errors yet in here. All right, this is not where we have errors. Where we start to get errors is in our error handler down here, and we're going to take care of this error handler stuff right now, because what we're going to do is we're going to, just like we've done, create error up here, and we use create error down there. We want to give these types down here in app.use, and it'll take care of all of these errors. Let's do it. So error should then be create error, right, .http error. That's the type. Request is actually an express request. So express.request. And response is an express, right, response. Okay, and this is the next function. So that's what this thing is, right? So this is the next part is express.next function. So that takes care of all of our errors, and now we have no more errors in our app.ts. Okay. I'm just going to go through and make sure that that there's no more vars anywhere, because vars, again, for me, are illegal. You cannot use them, right? No more vars. Vars don't exist. Cool. So this looks like it's going to work now, and we have everything here that we need. All right, let's test and see if this works as is. So again, going back to Node, we can see that now we've restarted it. And if I go back to here and refresh, it should not give us an error. We know then that everything has been updated to use TypeScript. So far we just updated everything. Let's put this up on GitHub because this is the next piece. So again, I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say fixed errors in app.ts. Okay, git push. And that pushes all those errors up. So you can compare your app.ts with mine now. Okay? Awesome, that's done. Next, we still have a bit of an issue because in our routes, we have two routes. One is users.js. We're never going to use this users.js route the way it is. Let's delete it. Delete. No more users.js. Bye-bye. Right? And if we do that, we only have index.js in routes. So I'm going to go into app.ts and get rid of this. There is no more user router. So let's get rid of that. But when we do that, it generates an error, and TypeScript tells us now where the error is. And this is what we want TypeScript for. If we have a problem, it'll tell us. Before, guys, there's no code hinting. There's no errors. right? So we can get rid of this now. We don't need to use this anymore. And again, no more errors. On says, what type is required for the last one, but not the second last one? You mean here? Is that good? On? Awesome. Okay, so that's the type. Let's also upgrade our index.js to an index.ts because we want to make this TypeScript. So again, going back to this, notice that this is using the old structure. What we want to do is we want to change this to index.js. Now, sometimes people find this very confusing. They're like, wait, we have an index.js already. Why are we having another index.js again? Well, it's in a totally different folder, so they're not going to clash, number one, right? So these are routes. And so again, if I change this to an index.ts, let's do that. So rename to index.js. Oops. Try that again. Well, now we're going to get into errors again, right? Because it doesn't understand what a couple of these things are, right? So again, we're going to go over here where we say a var, and we're going to say import express is from express. That's the first thing we want to do. That gives us the code hinting we want. And router, right? Well, that is going to be a const now. So that will be a const. Router is equal to express router. Notice that that gives us of type router. That's what that is, express router. And then we want to export default here. Export default. We want to call this router, right? Because that is what we want to export, just like we did this in the app.ts file. Now we can get rid of this. This is the old way of doing it with JavaScript. We use this way because we're building up a router from here. All right, now this is cool, but one thing to note, and we'll kind of go into this in a second, that this piece right here is the router and the controller in one. And we don't want to do this eventually. We want to restructure this so that it doesn't use the router and controller in one. Okay, but for now, we're going to be okay. And we'll explain this in a second. You can see that this is the response object that we're going to use to render the page. That's what it does. And we're passing in an object that's called title into the view. All right, so that's what this does. Let's get rid of this. There was a bit of a mistype. And now we have our index.js, which is translated. But if we look at our app.ts, now we have a bit of a problem because now our router, our index router, is not going to work out the same way. So let us do this in our app.ts. Well, we can do the same thing we did before. We can say that index router from routes.index. And we want to import, of course, not do a let statement. All right, so we can save that. And everything now is the same, but we're using imports instead of lets and consts. Okay, so why did I go and do all that stuff? Because now we have a fully working TypeScript project. And that's the conversion between when we converted from JavaScript to TypeScript, and we're doing that because we want good code hinting. And that is really the gist of everything, because once we have good code hinting, well, then everything is wonderful. Okay, that's the first part. Why? Well, look, everything has code hinting now, where before you may or may not have gotten all this stuff, right? And that gives us good tooling so we can continue. And this is a great place to put it up on GitHub again. So again, go back. I want to go here and I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we're going to say we are converted route to TypeScript. Our index route really is what we did. Okay, git push. And those are the things that we did. Okay, so now we're kind of part of the way there to get moving. We've got an app, but it doesn't do much. And let's now look at the public folder. So one thing we note is that in the public folder, right? It's called public, but public really doesn't mean much for us, right? In fact, what we'd rather do is in our structure, it would be better if we divided our whole structure eventually into client and server. We have a server part and we have a client part. That would be awesome if we could do that. Okay, so how would this look? Well, what we want to do is views is the server views. That's what this is, right? And routes is the server routes. Okay, so server is routes and views. Server also has a configuration, which is our app.ts, right? As well as we also have in public, we have images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. And none of this really conforms with what I like to do. And if you've watched the video, I change all this into something else. Let's do the changes now. So first thing is, let's rename public to client. All right, so rename public to client, capital C. So that's the first thing we want to do, rename public to client. And why did that not work? Sometimes, by the way, it won't allow you to do that while you're still running your file. So if we go to node, we can stop it. Stop nodemon. And again, we want to rename. So we want to go here and rename. Let's try this again one more time to client. There we go. It's better. Now that I've stopped it, it allowed me to because it locked these files, right? So there's client. You can see that's changed. In client now, because it's called client inside of my app.ts, what's happening is it says, hey, I want to join public to the path. That's what path.join does. We have a directory name, which is C:\users, Silly, OneDrive, Desktop, Centennial, blah, blah, blah. And that's what the directory name is. And public is was the name of my file, my folder on the outside, but we've changed it to client, which means we have to change this to client now. Okay. So we path joined. We're also going to use node modules for our Bootstrap. Let's add node modules to the path. So the way to do that is to say app.use express.static. Express static, what it does is it allows us to use static routing as opposed to custom routing. So we want to path.join dir name, which is the directory name, with what? Node modules. So node modules are sitting right here. There's node modules. So node mod, we're going to actually store, our Bootstrap, and we're going to store Font Awesome and jQuery and all that stuff in here in node modules, right? So we're going to use one node module for this. There's other ways of doing this. You can have separate node modules and separate package.jsons for each your client and your server, but I'm making it in one. So that's what I'm doing here. Next, after I've done this part, we are so far behind. Not really. The next piece that I'm going to do is I'm going to change my images so it's inside of assets. So I'm going to add a new folder. I'm going to call it assets, and I'm going to populate my images, which is nothing in there, inside of assets. Now, whenever you do this, and if you want to put this up on GitHub, notice that there isn't any files and images. Let's put a file in there just to keep the folder structure. And the way to do that is to click this plus button right here or add a file. And I'm going to add a gitkeep, .gitkeep. And what .gitkeep does is it keeps the file structure because you need a file in there. If you have an empty folder, GitHub will remove it. This way it'll keep it because there's something in there that's empty. Gitkeep is just a placeholder, if you will. JavaScripts doesn't make any sense. Let's change this to scripts. So we'll refresh this one. So right click and we'll rename this one to scripts. There's a scripts. Okay, and notice that there isn't a file in our scripts. Let's add a file. So add a new file, and we'll call this we're going to use TypeScript for this as well. We'll call it app.ts. And well, it'll be empty for now, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a IFI. Remember we did an IFI before, which stands for an immediately invoked function expression. We're going to put that in here, right? And it's going to look like this. Use strict. How about I do it the right way? Okay, use strict. And we're going to say function. Wow. If I can type today, that would be awesome. But I can't type today somehow. Yeah. And inside our function, well, maybe we did this last in the first week of class. We did a function called start. And what we said was that the function start is going to do a console log that's going to say app started. Wow. And then we're going to do a window dot add event listener load, which is going to call the start function. So that is your little IFI, and all it does right now is it just runs the start function, and that's inside of my app.ts, which is inside my scripts, which is inside my client. Cool. And then style sheets. We don't want to call this style sheets. Let's rename this to content, right? And under my style sheets, we'll call this app.css, rename. So refactor, rename to app.css. And our app.css right now has this stuff. Let's get rid of it. Let's just get rid of all this. There's nothing inside app.css. This is actually a placeholder. So your custom CSS goes here. We don't have any of that right now, but we're going to put some custom CSS here later on. Okay. So we have scripts, we have an app.ts, we have content, we have an app.css, and we have assets. We have just a .getKeep file inside of the images file, right? And this is our new folder structure, but we have a problem because views, inside of our views, we have an index.ejs, and our index.ejs actually uses something called style sheet. And there is no style sheets, style.css. We need to redo this thing all together because it's pretty crappy. So let's use a couple things. I'm going to change from EJS. I'm going to see that I can move this to HTML. Again, I clicked down here because remember I installed EJS language support for Visual Studio Code last week, and it detected this thing as a .ejs file, not an HTML file. So I'm changing this and I'm making this into a regular HTML file, just so it detects differently. There it is right here. And when I do that, I can use emmet, which is something that we talked about before. So I can do something that looks like this, right? Which is what I want. I want this structure, not this structure, right? And why? Because I have additional support, but I want to keep some of this stuff. So for example, if I put in here the title, I can do something that looks like this. Because that injects the title object inside of my title tag. That's what it does, my title object. So this is what this does, and I'll come back to this in a sec. I'll even keep this part. I don't mind this stuff right now. I can copy this and put it in my body. And I can get rid of all this. So now your new HTML looks like this. But one thing we want to put in is an area for CSS, like we've done before. And we also want to put in an area for JavaScripts, where we want to put what we did before that as well. So we did this here. So this is our JavaScript section. This is all we did. This is stuff we did in the first day of class. When we were together, I kind of did this with you, right? And why is this not doing what I'm asking it to do? And it should do this. There we go. Okay, so that is your HTML document. But what we want to do is we also want to use our Bootstrap and Font Awesome and all the other stuff I talked about in the video. So how do you include all that in here? as well. What do we do? Well, first things first, what we need to do is if we want to use Bootstrap, and by the way, for those people who haven't watched the video, here is Bootstrap. So if I go to getbootstrap.com, sorry, it remembers me. So if I go there, this is the latest version of Bootstrap, which is 5.0.1. That is the latest version of Bootstrap, and it tells us how to install Bootstrap. We can go do an npm install Bootstrap or a gem install Bootstrap, or we can also do a yarn install Bootstrap at version 5.01. If I just do a npm install Bootstrap, let me show you what that does, or a yarn install Bootstrap. Let's see what that does. So again, I'm going to go back to here, and I want to use the Bootstrap framework, which is what I talked about in the video. And if I go back to my package.json, this is what we're looking at. There is no Bootstrap that is labeled here. Let's add it in. So we'll do a yarn add. And if I just put in Bootstrap, let me show you what this looks like. Minus, nothing. Just put yarn add Bootstrap. It's going to add Bootstrap at 5.01, which is awesome. Okay? But Bootstrap has some dependencies. For example, it says Bootstrap 5.01 has an unmet peer dependency, which is popper.js/core 2.92. Let's add that in too. So we'll say yarn add at popper.js/core, right? And we can actually do just this and see what happens, if it gives us 2.92 or not. There it is. So popper.js core, Bootstrap is in, right? And we also should probably include jQuery. So yarn add jQuery, right? And what jQuery does is it gives great support for Bootstrap and other frameworks. That's just pretty cool. So that's what, and Bootstrap doesn't really need jQuery anymore, but I like to put it in for, backwards compatibility support. So those are the three things. The other thing we want to add is Font Awesome. So Font Awesome is the other font framework we're going to use. So Font Awesome, if I go there, and if I go to the homepage for Font Awesome, it tells us how to, if I click on Start for Free, it tells us how to install stuff with Yarn. So it says, hey, if you're going to install Font Awesome with Yarn, then it talks about how to do it. It says yarn add at Font Awesome/Font Awesome free. This is what we want to have right here. I can actually lift this whole command here and copy it and go back to my my project and paste it and press enter, and it adds in Font Awesome. Kind of what we did in the video. In the first video that I recorded last year, is what I'm saying. Now we can add support for Bootstrap, Font Awesome, and jQuery here. So the way to do that is to do yarn add at types Bootstrap --dev, right? And we're going to say yarn add at types / and again, we're going to say jQuery --dev. It gives us good support for jQuery. Yarn add at types, and if there was anything for that we need for popper.js, we would do it. Anything that we do this, yarn add at types, we can find most libraries for now. I think this is good enough. We don't need to add anything else. That's good support. All right, so now that we've added Bootstrap support, by adding these things here, right? We need to actually make a reference to Bootstrap inside of our index.ejs file. And I'll explain how this works in a second. So index.ejs, CSS section, I want to go in there, and normally what I would do is do something that looks like this. So I want to do a link, CSS, and we're going to say in here that it is going to go so it would be /node modules, but we're going to get rid of this in a second because node modules is on the path, Bootstrap, and then /dist/CSS, and we want Bootstrap, there's a bunch of them, What we want is bootstrap.min.css. This is the one we want. But one thing to note is that since node modules is on the path, we no longer need to do this. So we can remove this altogether and just say /bootstrap. Now, people are confused about that. And why do we have to do this? Why could we do this? Well, because we know that node modules is something we don't have to reference anymore. Why? Because if you look in our app.ts, we said that node modules is connected to our path. Path join our directory name, which in my case is c:\silly blah, 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 with the node modules folder right here. So when the browser searches through your file to find node modules, it can look through here and find it right here. That's how it works. All right, so that is why we didn't include it in here. We don't have to, is what I'm saying. /bootstrap is what we want to do. And to test this, if I press save, just doing this alone with nothing else, and it's not fully activated yet just by doing this, but let's see what happens. So if I press Control backtick, and what we want to do is we want to start NodeMon again. Let's see if we're going to get an error. Well, we don't really, but this doesn't tell us much because remember, this only cares about the server side, not the client side. So let's see what the client side looks like now when we go to our website, which is here, right? And if I refresh, you're going to see that it is over here, and this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. And the other thing is if I right click and go inspect, if I go to console, one thing we don't want to see is any errors, right? Let's keep watching here. And what I'm going to do to help us is keep going back to this right here every single time to check. I know that I'm using Bootstrap because of the text that I'm seeing here is way different than what we saw before. This is the standard text for Bootstrap, so I know it's running. And I'm not getting any errors here. If I did, then I know Bootstrap wouldn't be installed properly. All right, so that is, and look, it even found it. Bootstrap dist CSS, bootstrap.min.css. It found this thing, and so I know I'm on the right track. Next, let's do another one, link CSS. And what we want to do is we want to say, just like we did before, /node modules, sorry, /node modules. So we start off like this to help us get the path right. Fort Awesome, font awesome free, and we want to go to CSS, and we want all.min.css, and then what we want to do is erase the node modules reference. So we use the path to help us write it, right, instead of doing it the other way. And this will help us find the path for Fort Awesome. Okay, again, no difference here because when I refresh, we don't have an error, but we can see that it is working. And down here, it actually loaded Fort Awesome nicely, and it's good. That's number 2. Next one, we want to do a link, right, CSS. And we want to point to our content. And inside of our content, we want to go into my app.css. So that is where it's got to point next. So instead of style.css, we want to do content. Now remember that content and client is on the path. So what we want to do is something like this that looks like this. So /content. So it would be like more like /content because it's actually up one. So if I went to client, let me show you this. If I went to client /content, this is the actual path /app.css. We know that client is on the path, so we just need to get rid of that. Okay. And again, if I go back and refresh, we don't have any errors, and we can see that it's clearly loading content, no problem. So that is our CSS. We've actually set ourselves up for Bootstrap, which is a CSS framework. We've added Fort Awesome, and we've added our app.css here, which is our custom CSS, which we haven't yet used. Same thing for JavaScript now. We need to use Bootstrap. We have to use jQuery, and we should use our own custom JavaScript. So let's do that next. So script source. And we're going to do .. node modules / we want to have jQuery first. Let's fire jQuery next. So node modules jQuery /dist /jQuery.min.js. I'm going to do it all at once, guys. And script source / node modules /bootstrap /dist /js, and then bootstrap.min.js is what we want. Okay, so that's this one. And finally, our own custom module, script source / client /scripts, and then app.js, which is the one we want. Okay, now we can just revise these and get rid of the stuff we don't need because they're on their path. That would just help for us to get our path right, but we don't need to use a client or anything else. We can just use this, and that should be everything we need, and that we save. So that is our new HTML file, really, but it's going to be created as an example by when it routes to index.ejs. Let's test this by going here and refreshing. We should see app started down here because if you remember what happens when we load everything, we come down to jQuery and we go to bootstrap.min.js and we come here to scripts app.js, and scripts app.js come up to here where we have our app.ts that's been transpiled to JS, right? And our app.ts shows us app started, which is what we're seeing here. Make sense? Dist means distribution. All right, so that is what we've done so far. So really good stuff. We've restructured up. This is a great place to put it up on GitHub. Let's do that now. So we're going to go into PowerShell, and we're going to see git add dot. We made a lot of changes. You can see that there's a lot of files we added, like 2,000 files pretty much. And then git commit -m. And we're going to say added Bootstrap and font awesome support, which is really what we just did there, plus a bit of restructuring. And then git push, which is going to push everything up to GitHub. You're going to have everything you need now for your new structure. And this, we're on our way, guys, to having everything we want the way we want it. Slowly, we're using TypeScript and Node.js and everything else just to get things going the way we want. Okay, so this, my friends, is what I would have done in the first 2 hours of the videos that I've already kind of put out there. The next part is adding in the stuff that you need for your assignment. So assignment number 1. So this is, pay attention clearly here, what we need to do. One thing we need to know is in the assignment, I asked you guys for a navigation bar. Well, we're going to use Bootstrap for that. Let's not rewrite, kind of reinvent the wheel. And one thing we're going to do is in our index.ejs, I mentioned that we're going to install Bootstrap in here. Notice right now we have this really weird h1 tag as well as a welcome paragraph tag. We want to get rid of these. Actually, well, we'll leave these and we'll add a navigation section. So I'm going to add in a new navigation section in here. There's a navigation section. And inside here, I want to copy what we have, on the example from Bootstrap. Let's do that. So I'm going to go back up to Bootstrap. And inside of Bootstrap, I want to go to docs. And there is a quick start right on the left. Notice that there is an introduction, how to use Bootstrap, and blah, blah, and how to load it in. And they have this starter template. But on the left, they have every kind of possible thing you need from a component perspective, which is what I covered in the video from last year. So what we need is under components, there is a nav bar component, which is what we want. So here's our nav bar. And what I want to go down here is I want to grab this massive nav bar and cut it down, which is what I did in the video last year, but slightly different than what I'm going to do here. So copy this. Again, this is in components. I'm going to copy this thing and put it inside of your text here. So this is where it's at. Go grab that. So this is what we're talking about here. And what we want to do here is once we have this thing, we can go back into our Visual Studio Code and paste it in. Not that. This. And we have all this extra code, right? Well, let's keep it as is for now to see what this looks like in our page. So this is the first part. You get your navigation. And when I go back to here, as an example, in my Express, and if I refresh now, you're going to see that I have indeed a nav bar. There's my nav bar. Again, all I did was just drop in the nav bar from Bootstrap, which is white. And I want to make this dark. So let's change this to dark. So going back to here, we can see that navbar expand LG, so large. Navbar light, background light. We want to change this to navbar dark, background dark. And when I do that and press save and go back to the file and refresh, you can see now we have a black navbar, but we have stuff we don't need, right? So let's get rid of the stuff we don't need. And I want to push these things to the right. And it's slightly different in Bootstrap 5 than it was in Bootstrap 4, but nothing to worry about, really. It's just some slight modifications from what we had before. Again, don't panic, right? I think the main thing is not panicking, because a lot of stuff that we do here is what you want to do is it's the same structure pretty much that we're using from last year. The difference is that we've just modernized to Bootstrap 5 and everything else, and things progress. I think one of the comments I got earlier from On was, you know, your stuff is outdated. Well, yes and no. You could still do what you wanted to from last year, but you need to kind of move forward with the way things go with web technologies. Web technologies continue to move on, and we're going to see that as we move. It's not going to slow down anytime soon, that's for sure. So we got to keep moving with it. All right. So instead of like saying, well, you know, it's different than what it was before. Yes, it is, but don't worry about it, because what we're going to do is we're going to continue to roll with it as we go forward. So one thing we need to know is that once we've got our background dark and so on, how do we remove components from here? So that's the next thing. So we know that UL is an unordered list, and ULs are where we have a navigation items. We don't care about, we have an empty navigation item here, which is a link. This is good. We have our home page. That's good. But our drop-down menu, we don't need. This part here from where it says item drop-down, we can get rid of. And we can also get rid of something that's disabled. We don't need that part. We also don't need the form. So we've got rid of all those things. And now we only have this link. We have home. And this link is about, but we want to add some font awesome onto home. And we also want to get rid of this nav link active, which we're going to handle with EJS. So let's get rid of this nav link. We don't need the aria for now. Let's just get rid of this. So we'll start off like this, href, and then hashtag home for now. We're going to change these later on, but for now it says hashtag home. And what I want to do here is I want to make a little home. And what we can do, like a little home symbol, we can use Font Awesome for this. So going back up to here, we can go to Font Awesome. And I can look at icons, and I can search for home, which is what I showed you in the video. And if I click on this little home icon, it gives us the code right here. This is the code, right? So I grab that code. If I click on it, it copies it, go back to our code and pop it in. We want to put a little space between the icon and the word home. And we also want to use FAS, FA home, FA large. And the reason why we want to use FA large is because when we use FA large, it makes the home link bigger, not the little icon bigger. Yeah, so this looks like. So that's our first thing. It's our home link with an icon. Let's go back to see what that looks like now. If I go back to here and refresh, you're going to see that we have a little home link now next to home. Navbar is not really the right word. Let's use what we want. I'm going to put in here COMP229. That you're going to put in your logo in here. So going back, I can go back to where it says Navbar up here. I can change this to COMP229. All right. If I want, I can put a little logo there, which we will in a second, okay? So this is an empty link, and we want to follow the same pattern as we've got with our home. So let's copy, we need 5 links: home, about, projects, services, and contact. Those are the things you need for your assignment 1. Let's do that. So copy this. Why is the font white? The font is white because my background is black, and it automatically knows that. All right, so let's do that. So we're going to do this. So we're going to go from home. This is going to be about, right? And this link is going to be, we'll call it the info. I know these because I've done these before, so I'm just saving some time. Info is what I want to use for about. And I'm also going to change this to projects, right? And for our projects link, I think there's a gear icon or a cog. Let's look that up because I can't remember that one. So we'll say gear, cogs, or a cog. So that's our, kind of our projects, right? If you don't like this, you can use another thing for projects, but I like to use the cog. I don't know, just what I'm looking at. Again, would you use the exact same thing as me? No, you can use your own icons to customize your page. This is your page, not mine, right? I'm just making it to give you an example. FA-large, right? Let's put these together. So that's home, about, project, services. Services. We'll make that a map, some kind of map. Let's see if they have a map we can use. Map is, that's okay. Map signs, or what about a menu? I like maps or menus for this stuff. And you can see that there might be something that you might want to use that's cool, right? Maybe a map might be better. Yeah, maybe something like this, like a map. So this is like services, almost like a service map, if you will. So I can grab that. And let's populate that in there. So let's grab that and then add in FA-large at the end. Home, about, project, services, and contact. Contact's the last one. So this is contact. And we can change this to a phone, which is okay. And if I go back to here now and go to Express and refresh, you can see that I have home, about, project, services, contact. Look at that. Nice and easy, right? But I want to put all of this over here. And now we used something different before. And now it is slightly different than what we had before. So where the secret to all this is right here, where it says navbar nav ME auto, right? And we want to use MS auto, right? MS auto, it's just another margin is what we're going to do. MS auto, MB2, which is margin bottom 2, that's what it stands for. MB large, margin bottom large 0, that's what it does. So it kind of zeroes out the margin. So that's the kind of the first thing that we want to do. We want to put it so that it is on the right side, and we changed ME to MS. Let's see if that worked. So again, go back, and I can't remember if that's the one. Yes, it is. There he is. So this moves this over here on this side, right? Again, this is just using Bootstrap. All right, so that is pretty much where we want to start. One thing we want to also do is add some styling, not just to the navbar, but also to this. And the way we can do that is we can go into our, Bootstrap uses something called a content area, right? So we can use a div. Usually Bootstrap uses div tags to surround stuff. In the past, I used a Jumbotron. I'm not using a Jumbotron anymore. But what you could do is you can say, I want a div with a class of content, as an example. And let's use that for now. So with just a content, and if I put these two things inside of that div, just like this, and save, content is actually a Bootstrap class that gives us a little bit of margin on the left-hand side and puts these inside of that. So let's see how that looks now. And if I refresh, you can see that it should, did I not do it properly? Or did I save? If I don't save, bad things happen to good people. Class content, just a momento. And check my documentation for this. Container, yeah, I did mean container. Thank you for that. I'll be okay. There we go. So container does that, and we're good to go. Thanks, Lon. Someone's been watching the videos, which is good. Awesome. So that is this, right? And so you can see now that I have a header, I have some content, and now I need a footer. And let's put the footer in place here, which is going to be something I'm going to get from Bootstrap. Bootstrap also has not just nav bars, but it also has great examples of how to use things like forms and text, if I want to add text to my nav bar, or different color schemes that you can change. Notice that the dark also comes with the white text that you were asking about on. So that's one thing that happens. Containers and how to add a nav bar in a container, how to place stuff. And I want something called a fixed bottom nav. I want to grab these three things right here. And fixed bottom nav, I'm going to go back to here and put that in here. So this is going to be my footer. So I'll call this bottom nav from now. And it's just a fixed bottom nav bar. We can make this light, background light. And then you can see that this is a container fluid instead of regular container. So the container fluid goes automatically all the way to the left. There's no margin added to it. And then a class that's navbar brand, fixed bottom. We don't want that. Well, let's put an H4 tag. Instead, we'll put an an and copy. And we'll say that it is copyright. And for now, we're not going to put a thing, let's put 2021, right? Copyright 2021. Just to show you that that is going to fit at the bottom of my navbar. So if I press save and go back to here and look at Express and refresh, you can see at the bottom now there is a copyright 2021 navbar that is at the bottom. You can change this, content down here, but mostly none of these really change. And the reason why none of those are changing when we do stuff is because of routing, right? Right now, by default, the routing only looks at one thing. Notice in our routes container, all we have is one route, which is our home page. And it says when I go to my home page, which is /, that's the home page, or there might be the other one that we might want to use is not just / but home. So if it's either / or home, these two roots, if you will, or routes, what they do is they use the index view, which is this view right here, index view, and we are passing in a title of Express. Well, let's pass a title of home. Okay. So that's why we don't need if statements. We use these things, which are getter, almost like a get. And I seem to have lost. I'm really happy, so happy about Zoom these days. It's really bizarre. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. Let's try that again. All right. Sorry. What I was saying was, here we go. Back to this. I'm saying that when we create routes like this, what happens is for every route that's named, it goes to that particular page. So example would be and this is the last thing we're going to do today, guys, just do a little bit of routing. And then next week, we'll patch in everything else you need for your assignment 1. Okay. So let's go back up to the page. And notice if I go / like so, then it takes me home. It says home, welcome home, right? And if I go to / home, it also says home, welcome to home, right? So this is interesting, but not exactly what I want. Let's go back to our page and reprogram this a little bit. So in our index.js, instead of saying home, welcome home, we'll just take out this h1 tag and we'll say welcome, or or we'll say the home page, welcome to the, and then whatever the page name is called, and then followed by page. Now, what this is doing is title, right? Title, where does title come from? Title, the variable title, is part of the route. So if you look at the route, we're passing an object with a property of title to the page, right? So now if I want other routes, let's add the other routes in there just to give you the sense of that. So 1, 2, 3, right? Instead of going to home, we can go about, right? Projects, services, and finally contact. Okay? But it's still using the index template. So this is the template. The template is index.ejs, but it's injecting a different title every time we press something else. One thing we note is that this is all wrong. Home should be /home, right? This should be /about. These are the navigations that we have to put in. This is /projects, right? This is /services. And finally, this is /contact. Okay, so this is our routing that we've added in. And now that we've got this and we've modified this is our routing table. And remember, what we're really doing is we're getting the home page here and here, because these are, whether you put /, so you just go to the page itself, or you put home, you get the home page, right? If you go about, we're going to get the about page. We're going to get the project page. Remember that when we make a, what we're doing is we're doing a GET request. The GET request is returning the page that I'm asking for, right? And what's happening is that Express is creating the page for you through the EJS template right here. EJS standing for Express with JavaScript, right? So that's what this does. So that is the project page. This is the services page. And finally, the contact page. Okay, so that's what it does. It goes through, and each one of these routes, it uses a bit of logic. The logic is right here. That's the logic. It says, hey, respond with rendering the template called index right here. Wow. Wow. Sorry, guys. Having real issues today with Zoom. Having real issues today with Zoom. Don't know why. I don't think it's my computer. I think it's definitely my connection here where I am. Let's go back to this. Sorry, I was just saying that these are all routes, and this is the logic behind the route. And sorry, I'm going to run a little bit overtime, guys, because of my disconnections. Bear with me, please, and then you'll have everything you need to start your assignment. So res render, res is response render, which means draw or create a page through the template. We're going to pass in an object into the page with a title property, and the value of the title property is going to be home. And then when the index.ejs reads it, it injects the title variable here, so that the value that we've assigned in the router gets introduced or injected or interpolated Wow, that's terrible. I don't know how you guys are bearing it. It's so bad. I've had nothing but disconnection problems with Zoom today, which is way unusual for me. Okay, may have to reinstall Zoom. Don't know what that problem is. Anyways, so that is, it injects in here, and that's how it creates the page. Okay, so hopefully you get that piece. And luckily, we're also recording everything. So what this does is it does all the routing by clicking on any one of these links. It actually does the routing for us. Let's try this out and see if it works. So going back to here, let's refresh the page. Now it says welcome to the home page, so we know automatically it's starting to work. And if I click about, projects, services, or contact, it changes the context of what we have here. Guys, this is a great start for what you need to do for next week. I highly recommend you use this template starting off, the one I'm giving you on GitHub, so you can start your portfolio pages off here. Next week, what we'll do is we will, I will show you how to modify what we have here so we can split it up into different partial pages, which is something that we're going to handle next week. Okay. Again, it's all in the documentation that I've shared with you in the course shell already. So remember, this is nothing that you're not going to miss. Yeah, next week, because next week on is, I'm not sure why she's the host, to be honest with you. That's okay that she's the host. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not sure why I'm dropping. I don't understand why I'm dropping. So that's okay. But it's really weird that we keep on dropping. On says, is next week's material less? No, on. Actually, it's going to get more and more as we go. And the reason for this is because there's a lot about how to do all this, how to put all this stuff together. And again, very little time. So a lot of the stuff that I ask you to do from next week is the stuff that I want you to do. You need to do a little bit of your own watching and reading and trying before we meet together every week. You definitely are the second in command host. Excellent. All right, so let's clear this up. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m, and what we're doing here is we've basically added navigation. So added simple navigation is what we did this time. Okay, and we're going to clear this, and we're going to say git push, which is going to push everything to your GitHub repo, which you can use to compare my code with your code. Okay. And we're getting all kinds of people calling me, which you're going to have to wait to do. And by the way, if you notice that this is taking a while, this is a great indicator that there's something going on with the network. Yeah, see, look at that. It says failed to connect to GitHub, port timed out, right? So that is something that's happening with my my network here today for some reason. So git push. And there we go. We just try it again, and we're good to go. So I'm getting definitely getting disconnections here, which is what's causing the problem. All right, so that is what's happening. Any questions before? I know that we covered a lot of this stuff. So basically what we talked about is how to configure everything with Express. That's what we kind of covered today. I know it was lightning fast, but remember, I'm trying to get you up to speed with the stuff that that is modern and what's happening now. What the course shell is showing us is all the stuff about Express, how to make your first application. What does that look like? And this is the stuff that's in here. What's the difference between a request and response? Please watch the videos, because that is what's going to tell you all about request response objects, as well as what they want you to do from the book that we're using for application folder structure. However, I recommend you use my folder structure, as it is far simpler than the one in the book. Okay, so that's what it talks about here. It also goes on in the course shell to talk about additional pieces. For example, the Express, how do I configure the Express application? And it kind of talks about in detail about how to do that, as well as how to render views. Remember, the render keyword means to draw or to create the view. Each view is a page. And so what we're actually doing with Express and the mean stack is we're creating or smashing together pieces of our page to create the HTML content for the user. That's what we're doing, as opposed to actually fixed HTML pages. There are no HTML pages anymore. We are rendering all the views for the user as we go. So that's how it works. That's the whole rendering pipeline, the way it works. So again, we have our view. we request the template. So here's our user basically says, hey, I want a view. And the view basically goes into our controller. The controller requests the template and returns and updates the view. That's what ends up happening. So render actually outputs HTML stuff. It creates the HTML on the fly or in real time for you, as opposed to having the HTML pages that are static. We don't have static pages here. We have dynamic HTML page creation. That's what happens with Express. So what we're actually creating is something called a single page application. Because if you think about this, we only have one single page or one template, index.ejs. And what we're doing is we're swapping content when I click on each of the links. Each of the links actually allows me to inject different content inside of this area here as we go. Okay, any questions before we stop for the day? I know there's a lot that I gave you there, but this is the template that you need to get going. This is a good start for what we're going to be doing next week and ongoing for the rest of the semester. And that's why I went and did all this stuff, because I'm going to be using this project template, week 3D, to move forward with everything else, including authentication and everything else I'm going to give you for the remainder of semester with TypeScript support, which is awesome for you guys. However, if you don't want to use TypeScript support, remember that there's always the option of just following along with the videos, and it should cover most of what you need to get your portfolio made for assignment 1. All right. So last thoughts before we go for today is, if you look at the schedule again, we've covered an intro to Express with the videos. I talked about the Express generator and how to use it and everything else today. One thing we didn't have a chance of doing is how to deploy our Express app to Heroku, but you can watch the video for this, and I'll be doing it next week as well. Next week, we're going to start with MongoDB, so expect a MongoDB installation. We're going to be doing this next week, but also think about that by next week, the end of the week, on week 4, I'm going to hopefully give you everything you need to have your assignment 1 ready to go for Friday. Okay, so please make sure you attend next week. The videos will start on Monday, and I'll kind of recreate everything for you guys when I see you guys on the Wednesday. All right, any questions before we go? Guys, I really apologize for the quality today. I kept on cutting out because of Zoom, but not sure what's going on. If it's here at home where I'm at this, we're kind of at a temporary spot, or if it is Zoom itself. Not sure. It seems like it's me, not you, so I do apologize for it. But hopefully you've got everything you can on YouTube. Mustafa says, so we can use the week 3D as a template for assignment, or no? Yes, you can. Start off with that, Mustafa. Why would you recreate the video? I'm telling you, here's something you can do. I wanted to make it easier for you. Thanks, Davy. Yes, thank you so much. And you can watch it, yes. And remember that these videos, think about what we're doing. Every time we get together, it's like a little lab. And I'm trying to help you to use the technology to create assignment 1 and assignment 2. Remember that the first half is training for you so that you can make your own application in the second half. So all the technology I'm giving you in the first half is critical to make sure that you're able to be successful in the second half. Okay? Any questions before we go? Okay, guys, thank you so much. Connect with me on Discord if you have a question, and we'll see each other next week. Good luck. Thank you. Thanks, Sayeda. Take care. See you on.